And there are so many things happening here in Ghana and as well as the world. And as leaders, it is also our duty to contribute our quota to the national discussion that is ongoing, which might be also helpful in one area or the other. We all know the kind of crisis that we are having. We are having, and as a matter of fact, we would have to, based on the skills we have, based on our professional experiences, we have gathered here today to see how we can, each of us in our individual capacity can bring us suggestions that we will put together in a form of an official communication from the institute and to be presented to the presidency. Because we've seen so many advice coming to them from one area or the other. We would want to send them an official presentation. We don't really want to, be bringing in the media and the others, no, but we just want to send them an official communication, which we believe so that when we send to them, the government would act upon. So as certified leaders in our various fields of endeavors, if you are gathered here today, that is the main reason of gathering. But when we look at our numbers, we have about 13 people on board now. But because some of our facilitators also have other activities they would have to do right after our event, and we don't really have much time on our side, we would have to just go on with activities of the conference. And I will promise that after the event, we will still have the video online for those who couldn't join earlier to also, watch and get a feel of the discussions that we had earlier on before maybe they also join. So today we are basically going to have two main speakers to talk to us or to present, and also going to be a series of activities and series of discussions that will be facilitated by the second speaker. But with such an occasion, we will have to get a chairperson to steer the affairs, and she is no other person than our own Mrs. Nanajwa Kunedu Jani, the founder of CILG Ghana Foundation. She is a fellow of this institute, the Chartered Institute of Leadership and Governance, as well as the vice chairperson of the National Executive Council of the Chartered Institute of National of CILG, Chartered Institute of Leadership and Governance. Madam Chairperson, your audience.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Director. Good morning, fellows. Good morning, members of CILG. It's an honor to chair this very important program and celebrating leadership. As is our mandate as Chartered Institute of Leadership and Governance, celebrating us as leaders. It's a privilege to be the chair of today's event on the theme, Building Trustworthy Leadership for Global Transformation. I'm happy that though we are not many, at least we are able to start on time so that we'll be able to finish on time. As leaders, time management should be one of topmost priority. So I was happy when Dr. Adams called me. So without wasting much time, I would like to ask our own Dr. Adams, the country director, to introduce the first speaker, so that we can hear what Prof have for us. Then we'll continue with the program. Happy and I accept to chair the screen for the honor. So tell them if you kindly introduce Prof, but able to finish and get on with the rest of the activity. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson, and it's always an honor to also have you on board, as you've always done for us. But to do us the honors and to do the first presentation for this morning's event is no other than our own chairperson of our National Executive Council, in a person of Professor Jonathan Fletcher. Professor Fletcher is a mathematics specialist educator, teacher, professional development expert, and assessment consultant. Professor Fletcher is the current president of the Ghana Education Research Association and a council member of the World Education Research Association. He is also the education director on the board of directors at the Ghana International School. In addition to working with graduate students on their master's and PhD programs, he serves as a consultant for the Ministry of Education and a key advisor on teaching and learning partnerships at the Transforming Teaching, Education and Learning, where he supports University of Colleges of Education in teacher professional development programs. Professor Jonathan Fletcher has published extensively, and his publications include books on mathematics as well as papers on the teaching and learning of mathematics, assessment in education, teacher professional development, and teacher performance appraisal. He is currently working with colleagues in the Department of Education Studies and leadership on a research project exploring strategies to improve teacher access to professional development. Professor Fletcher is also the current chairperson for Chartered Institute of Leadership and Education, and also a distinguished fellow of same institute. Prof. Fletcher, we are ready, if you are ready.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Adams, for the introduction. And good morning to you all, colleagues. I'm happy that we have a number of us here. I know it's a very busy week. It's been a very busy week, but I think I'm really impressed that even so, we have a number of us here. We're going to have a conversation about crisis governance or crisis leadership or leadership in crisis. And it's important for us, all of us, to contribute one way or the other to the discussion. So at least at the end of it, we will be able to, at least if we're not able to prefer any solution to the crisis, we will be able to engage leaders of this country in a conversation, because it's a bigger conversation that will help all of us to find solutions to the crisis that we're in, all of us that we're both in. So what I'm going to do is far from prescribing anything, any solution to anyone. What I will do is to look at what other countries have done. I'll look at the strategies that others have used, and we will then examine these strategies in our own time and find which strategies work and which strategies don't work. However, I will be arguing that in countries where the leaders listen to technocrats, those countries are able to take decisions very quickly. And in countries where leaders don't listen to technocrats and use political ideology, they are not very quick in responding to a crisis. That is my main thesis today, and all of us will have a look at that and see if it's something that we can discuss and support. We all know that crises come in different forms, in many forms, including the act of God. And so you have hurricanes, you have outbreaks of diseases, and you have, of course, crises that are human-made, particularly if people build houses where they shouldn't. In waterways, we know what happens. When it rains, we have crisis on our hands. And of course, we cannot leave war out. I mean, these are all human-made crises. But the fact that they're human-made does not mean that we shouldn't say something about it. We shouldn't try and do something about it to prevent, or at least to find ways in which we can address the problems or the challenges that accompany these crises. So crises are not new to us. In other words, nothing will surprise us because we know crisis will happen one way or the other. But as leaders, we should anticipate that and plan accordingly. And so our role is to always be on alert and prepare plans that will help us deal with crises when they arise, because they will definitely arise. So I'm not going to give a very long speech. As I said, most of the things I'm going to say you know already. So pardon me, but then I will say them nevertheless, because what that means is that the things you know are really good, because then if even they're not good, it means we all know the same thing. So if what I know is not good and what you know is not good, at least we are on the same platform, and then we can all try and make sure that we move towards saying things that we think can help. And so that is the position I've taken this morning to try and share with you a few ideas about how we can, as an organization, contribute to finding solutions to the challenges that we have in this country. I will begin by, and I think it's important for me to share my screen so that I can, at least people will follow what I'm doing. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to try and share my screen. If Dr. Adams will permit me to do that. Doc?
Prof, please can you share your screen?
Okay, I can share my screen. I hope I'm sharing. Yeah, okay, good. Okay, so is Ghana in the midst of global crisis, the role of political leadership? Okay, so, and Dr. Adams has already mentioned that. And as I said, we will look at different forms of crisis, and then how other countries have actually, attempted to address this. And particularly, I'm going to use one particular crisis, which is to do with the COVID-19 situation, because that was very, very fast. And then countries that actually acted as fast as they could to save a lot of lives. Countries that were not able to do so lost a lot of lives. So that's the line of my argument. If I get this into presentation mode, maybe that will help. Oh yeah, okay, cool. So again, I will begin by talking about the importance of effective leadership during crisis. I mean, that is an understatement of the millennium, because if we are leaders and there are crises, then of course we have to lead in such a way that we are able to overcome the crisis. And so it's not new at all. We must, bear that in mind. But what I've tried to do is look at, I've looked at a number of articles written by Singley. Three things they point out. First of all, we all know that when you have a crisis, then of course they would threaten a fundamental value of guarding, because every leader is responsible for making sure a citizenry and people, even the government work, everybody's welfare and well-being protected. That's the number one thing. And secondly, crises don't walk slowly, so to speak. They run very fast. So they're very, very quick. And that makes it very difficult to control. Okay. And the third thing about all crises is that you have no idea when the crisis will end. And so all these things put together make it very difficult for management of crisis, okay? Because they attack the value, the fundamental value that you owe to the people, so to speak. So a government will have to protect the interest the lives and the livelihoods of citizenry. And if it happens like that, once that is attacked, then everybody's panicking. And then secondly, the attack is not slow, it's done very, very fast and quickly. And because of that, it becomes very difficult to even know where to start from. And then of course, you don't know when it's going to act. And so it's very difficult for everyone, the people who are in the country and the people who are leading the people in the country. Everybody is confused because we don't know when this is going to end. And if we're not careful, then we resort to things which are not going to help us. And so I will also be talking about evidence, using evidence in understanding the crisis, using evidence to look for solutions, using evidence to communicate the solutions to the people, the citizenry, so that it's not just finding the solutions, but it's very important how the solutions are actually communicated to them. So it's very important. Two things that I think very, very important: evidence of things that work and communication of how this is communicated to the people. And we all know that great leaders have always done that. Great leaders will always go to the people and say, look, this is where we are. We have a crisis on our hands, and this is what we are doing to help. That is very important. Yeah. And so next I will talk about I've talked about this one. Let's move on to the next thing. The next slide is talking about, and the first one is understatement of the millennium, because effective leader, if you're effective leader and there is crisis, you should be able to handle the crisis. And that, in other words, if you flip it, it means that if we're going to be able to overcome crisis, then we must lead effectively. It's as simple as that. I think I'm sure this is something you've heard 1,000 times. And also, we all know that we're talking about global crisis, okay? And we know our political leaders, okay? And I've said already that it is something that is very fast. They occur very, very quickly. And so it's important that political leaders, also plan and have that in mind, that these things will happen, and if they happen, they are going to affect people. And how do we approach? Scrutinized by both academic and the public. Academic in the sense that academics are always trying to find causes and effects, trying to find the correlation between different things. And therefore, if they're able to establish some correlation, then they can work on the premise that if you stop if the cause, then of course you can stop the effect. In other words, so they're trying to find the relationship between the cause and effect and work on the cause. And so that if they're able to tackle the cause very well, then of course they will have a chance of actually preventing what the cause will lead to. And so they have studied this over and over again in different countries. And in this country too, we have been doing that. The second one is public scrutiny. And I know you all know that what happens in this country, the media really, they're unforgiving, because if leaders make mistakes, the media will never forgive them. And therefore, everybody is trying to see what's going to happen. If there is a crisis, then everybody wants to find out what is being done about that particular crisis. So leaders or political leaders have nowhere to hide, because both academic rights happened, and of course it'll be very difficult even for them to govern properly. And so at least they need both academics and the public to have this scrutiny. And so it's very important that they do that. And as I said earlier, one of the crises that we have had this century, well, the beginning of the century actually, which is, well, not beginning, 2020 is not the beginning of the century, but 2 years ago, we had this COVID-19 pandemic, which is something that tested, the mettle of every leader in this country. So I'm going to give a few examples, a couple of examples, and see what happened. We all know that when that happened, we had a lot of situations in different countries. People were losing their lives. We had people could not even go out. I mean, there were cases where people had to stay indoors, and this country happened. So we were all at home. We couldn't move out. Elsewhere, the same thing. In some cases, people were indoors for nearly a month, or in some cases, even 3 months in China and so on. And so that is something everybody in the world experienced. It's a very good point to use that to do that. And the evidence, which I will mention later, because I have the references in the later slides, which a number of them, which would suggest that leaders who relied on scientific evidence were successful. There were leaders who believed that this is a health situation and the best thing to do is to listen to the scientists. And in some countries, scientists were actually briefing government leaders or political leaders on a daily basis. And that's the idea. The idea was that these are the scientists. They understand the condition or the disease. And so we've got to listen to them. And so in many cases, that was the case. It wasn't different in this country. In this country, it was the same thing. The scientists were at work. And so people in the Ministry of Health were doing all they could to provide data, which was used to make decisions. So, and it was important that if any country did not use data in that manner, then that country shortchanged the citizenry, because a lot of people would have died, would have been saved if the data had been used properly. And so we realized, I mean, we're in this country, we realized that some countries did better than others. And we know the countries that did better than others. And somebody will argue that our country is one of the countries where decisions were taken very, very quickly. In other words, in this country, we paid a lot of time, attention to data which had been generated by the science people and the people in health, and we use that. And of course, we talked about vaccinations, and government officials were always on the air trying to convince people to get vaccinated and so on. So that was a good thing that we did as a country. Trying to contain the situation in such a way that we're not going to lose so many people. Now, of course, we didn't lose so many people. So that is, and countries, we had countries that were losing over 1,000, citizens a day. And so that is the difference between leaders who were willing to incorporate scientific, evidence, and those leaders who were not. And we know them. There are a few examples here of leaders who did do that and leaders who didn't. And so we look at the US, for example. President Trump was criticized because he barely relied on scientific advice. He didn't, as much as the president does. He didn't. He didn't really believe that the scientists could actually do anything. And if you compare Trump with Angela Merkel, who was then the Chancellor of Germany, you can see that a lot of work was done in Germany. And Miller has written a lot about how Germany overcame that. And to the extent that they thought it was because Angela Merkel herself is a scientist. And of course, being a scientist, she believed that every decision was to be based on science and not on political ideology. And so that was a very good point that was made at a time that countries should listen to the scientists. In the UK, for example, I mean, I think the government was briefed on a daily basis, and the scientists were in control, and they were given the opportunity to communicate what was going on to the general public. And so it's important that in terms of crisis, and because crisis, whichever form it is going to take, any crisis will evolve very quickly. And therefore, it's important for leaders to take actions very quickly. In other words, in terms of crisis, time is of the essence. And no country has got the opportunity to delay, because if a country delays, then of course that country is actually putting the citizens at risk. And therefore, it was important for countries to do that. So you could put the president or the heads of state in the world into two categories: those who listened to the scientists and those who didn't. And there's evidence to suggest that, particularly if you read Miller's thing, there was evidence to suggest that a lot of the countries where leaders did not listen to scientists pay the price, and so it's important to bear that in mind. So I'm going to move on to the thing. So if you look at the observations that I've made so far, there's one question that I asked myself, and this question is in other words, the extent to which leaders must listen to the scientists in order to make decisions, and that's very important. And what that means is that the more they listen, the better, for them to be able to contain the situation. If they don't listen, then it will take them longer. That is the hypothesis. And so, and we know that there are reasons to believe that when we have scientific evidence, it is important to use the scientific evidence because they will have. And I gave you just one example. We all know how Winston Churchill led Britain to win the Second World War. I mean, from a position of losing the war completely to a position of winning it. That is important. And the argument that people have always put up is that Winston himself believed in scientific procedures, in scientific principles, and scientific strategies. Okay, so, and his love for science and believing in science and getting the evidence, that is how the war was won. And so it's important that leaders use evidence. All the decisions must be based on evidence. And I'm happy to say that at least in our country, we realize that every time the president spoke to the people, the president gave figures of people who had unfortunately lost their lives and people who were in hospital and how these people were doing and so on. And so it was very clear that the people in this country knew what was going on. They knew who was at risk and who was not. And even the president went to the extent of even encouraging people to exercise on a daily basis and eat well and so on. So that is the idea. And everything like that was based on evidence, on science. It was not based on ideologies. It was not based on metaphysics. It was not based on some spiritual thing. It was based on science. So the evidence was saying that if people get vaccinated, then the chances of contracting the disease is very few people wearing masks and so on. Everybody believes strongly that the vaccination worked, and so they feel protected and they're able to go about their normal duties, without any fear, because they know that they are okay. And so that is the importance. That's the importance of evidence, scientific evidence that can help leaders take decisions in crisis period. And so I'm going to put these leaders into two categories. And as I said, I'm not going to say too much today. And I know there'll be discussion and people will have ideas. But I'm going to put these two into two categories. Okay. But then before then, it's important to understand whether or not a leader is going to take an action. That would depend on two main things. It would depend on the leader's beliefs. Okay, if the leader does not believe in science, it won't work. And not only that, again, it also depends on whether the leader actually recognizes that there is a crisis situation. And if the leader does not believe that there is a crisis situation, then they are not going to be able to do anything. So it's very important to get to look at these two things, the leader's beliefs and their personalities in crisis situation. So they must recognize that there's a problem. And if they don't, if the leaders don't come out to say, we have a problem, then that itself is a problem. And so it's important for leaders to recognize the crisis. Okay, even if the crisis is as a result of actions or their own inactions, they put up their hands. They must put up their hands and say, look, we have a crisis on our hands. Okay, and so people are aware. And it is only that the leader will actually proceed to find solutions to a crisis. Okay, so you can put leaders into two categories. Leaders who, as I said, I have what I call technocratic mentality, who believe, the leaders who believe that there are technocrats, and therefore we've got to listen to technocrats. And if we listen to technocrats, they're going to advise us. Not only in times of crisis, but that is what it is. People are educated on different aspects of life, and they spend a lot of time and invested their time studying in these areas. And therefore, it's important for leaders to acknowledge these people and say, look, we have a problem on our hand. How are you going to help us? And I think this is exactly what we are doing here as an organization, as a Chartered Institute of Leadership and Governance. We're trying to say that, look, okay, we have the expertise, and therefore we want to be part of the conversation. That is what it is. And you expect leadership to acknowledge that. And so if they acknowledge that, then there may be, a solution. If they don't, then there won't be a solution. Okay. So again, when I say somebody's a technocrat, then that person, as I said, is relying on scientific facts and evidence. Okay. So again, it's not a spiritual thing. It is not metaphysics. It's just physical evidence, real evidence that if we do A, B will happen, and if B happens, then the problem will end. So that is the kind of conversations that we expect leaders to be having, and also convince everybody in the country that we're doing something about it. Okay, and then we come clean and say that, look, we know we have a crisis on our hands. This is what we are doing. So we are taking steps A, B, C, D, and the idea is that when we've taken these steps A, B, C, D, we're going to have E, F, G, H, and then as soon as we get to H, the problem will be addressed. So it's important, and of course, when there is evidence, then everybody will understand that there is evidence. If there is no evidence, then people are going to question. And so it is not to say that people should not believe in their ideological positions in politics. That is not what we are saying here. What we are saying here is that when we have a crisis on our hand, we should look for evidence of things that work and do them. Okay, we may momentarily suspend whatever to do with our ideologies, because our ideologies may not help the situation. If our ideologies are going to help the situation, fine. But in most cases, it might not help the situation. And so we probably will not even have, expert knowledge to be able to address the issue. And therefore, it's important to develop this technocratic response to the question or the issue, because without that, it's very difficult to do that. And I know that in many countries, in most cases, these things happen, particularly especially if it's not to do with human lives. We had people making mistakes and things affecting everybody. Yeah, but even so, it's important, as I said, even so, it's important for leadership to come clean and say, look, we got it wrong. And of course, there's nothing wrong with leadership taking risks with a view to, improving living conditions. Of course, that's what it is. So leadership, have the liberty to actually do that, to actually take risks But if the risks don't go well, then of course they have to quickly come back and say, look, we wanted to do this for the betterment for everyone, but it didn't work like the way we wanted it to work. So we hold our hands up and we're going to change course. So it's important. But everything that we do, it's important that there must be evidence, because without the evidence, it'll be very difficult to convince anyone that this is going to work. And in most cases, that happens because people do not believe that something is going to happen because they have not been shown the evidence. And we all know that if we are able to, as leaders, we are able to provide evidence to our followers or people who we work with, that look, this is the evidence, and if we don't do A, we cannot get B, and therefore, and of course, you show research evidence and scientific evidence, especially scientific evidence, so that people will believe that it's important to listen to advice. And I remember some time ago we had a British health secretary. You probably have heard his name. His name is Ken Clark, and he was not listening to the doctors, and so the doctors went on demonstration, and then they put on a placard, what do you call a man who does not listen to medical advice, who does not take medical advice? And then they wrote his name, Ken Clark. Okay, so you know what he did? They went to Parliament and said, Mr. Speaker, what do you do to a man, or what do you call a man who does not listen to or who does not take medical advice? And then he said, Mr. Healthy. In other words, he was trying to say to them that he was healthy before he was not taking. But of course, he wasn't that healthy, and soon he lost that position. So it's important to listen to experts. Whatever we do, listen to experts. So they have spent time and effort invested in their studies, and they have come up with decisions and based on research evidence. It's always important to do that. And so we ask ourselves, we have in this country, which group are we going to put our leaders? Are they the people in the technocratic category, or people in ideological category? And I leave that to us to do that. But then the thing is clear that, because I will argue that any country where ideology takes precedence over the technocrat reasoning, then of course that country is going to suffer. So, and as I said this morning, I'm not going to say too much because there will be discussion. So I'm going to bring my short discussion or conversation to a close. But of course, I must conclude. And so I'm going to end by saying that, and again, that's my argument. My argument is that leaders with that technocratic mentality are the ones who will listen to advice. And of course, because of that, they are the ones that can take decisions very quickly. Okay, so if they don't, then it will take a long time to take a decision. And remember, I said that when it comes to a crisis situation, time is of the essence. And therefore, the slower the process of making a decision, the more difficult it is for the country to address the issue. And so that is my day. And so I believe strongly that countries where leaders are more interested in listening to this, and these are the countries where they would have no problems at all solving the problems. Otherwise, it will be difficult for any country without that to do that. And of course, when they have got the solutions, they've got to address this, and not only that, but also communicate the solutions to the citizenry. So I will end by thanking all of you for coming and for taking time out of your schedule to be here. And I'll say finally, thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Jonathan Fletcher. Professor Jonathan Fletcher is the current NEC chairman or NEC chairperson for the Chartered Institute of Leadership and Governance, and also the Dean for School of Leadership and Education at University of Ghana. Thank you, Prof. As we said, there will be a second presentation. So we want you to keep notes of all your questions. Kindly keep notes of all your questions, jot them down. After the second presentation, then you can come in with your question after the second presentation. We will just want to do this very quick, just do it within time and close exactly at 12 o'clock. So the second person to do us the honors, or the second person to give us the second presentation, is in the person of Major Dr. Ebenezer Kwakye Agyemang. Major Dr. Ebenezer Kwakye Agyemang is a distinguished and multiple awards winning retired military officer of the Ghana Armed Forces and holds a double doctorate degrees with over 2 decades of experience in defense strategy, security risk, and resilience leadership. He was a staff officer for intelligence, training, and operations at the headquarters Northern Command of the Ghana Army and a directing staff at the Ghana Army Combatant Training School. He is a prolific writer whose books include Decoding the 2019 Novel Coronavirus, Leadership and Discipline, and Transnational Organized Crime Terrorism, an emerging security challenge in West Africa. He's currently doing collaborative work with the Ghana Army on 2 other books, and Terrorism in West Africa and Boko Haram, and Hybrid Insurgencies. He is the non-executive president of Crossbridge Leadership Institute. He is currently the risk manager at Mensen Gold Beginning Limited at Asante Gold Mines. He is a network member of the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime and a fellow at the Chartered Institute of Leadership and Governance. He is an officer, an academician, a defense and security practitioner, a leadership and discipline crusader, and a researcher. Major Dr. Kwakye Agyemang. Please, your audience, you are ready. Hello?
Yeah, Doc, Major is muted.
Okay. Major, kindly unmute yourself.
It's muted.
Kindly unmute yourself, Major. And Prof, please, can you stop your screen sharing, please?
Yes, please. Yes, just requesting that if I give opportunity for me to share the slide with you.
Yes, so Prof, can you please, yes, so you can now go ahead.
Just 2 minutes, then we can move on from there.
Please, whilst our Major is trying to get the screen sharing, as you said earlier on, please, if you have any questions, any clarification, you can jot them down. And right after the presentation from Major, we are going to zoom into the discussion. Thank you.
Okay. So as Dr. Asare rightly indicated, I'm going to push on from where Professor Fletcher left off, and it's indeed a very big hat that I'm going to wear today. It's very much a bit of a humbleness and a bit of a troubling presentation. However, we'll shoot straight away into the presentation, and I will take some few other areas that perhaps Prof. Fletcher didn't touch in detail, and I will only add up to make it complete for us to have a better understanding. Then we can move from there as a team. Whether we like it or not, leadership stems from people having an idea to demonstrate a vision through other people. And we're also looking at global crisis, as mentioned by Professor Fletcher. The crisis will not come and announce. It comes in a very short period of time, very, very disruptive, and more or less gets everybody confused. And so the challenges we are facing at the moment on the globe include coronavirus mentioned, climate change, cybersecurity, challenging, confronting us in respect of organized crime, rich-poor gaps, terrorism, and other demonstrations that relate to political radicalization, and also in recent times in Africa, the emergence of coup d'etats. All these are critical issues that require that our leaders take their time to understand and also ensure that at the end of the day, they are able to solve the problems in the region they have been elected. It's also important for us to note that in addition to some of the crisis issues that I mentioned, leaders are expected to also monitor the social dimensions of the things that they do. So now the social media and indeed ICT has come to play, and that globalization has also come to more or less disrupt the normal sovereign arrangement that each state may have. So now natural borders have been removed, and ICT has more or less come to also present another challenge. So for me to do this particular presentation, I'm going to walk us through about 6 areas where we look at the conceptual definitions, crisis we face globally, Ghana in the midst of this crisis, also looking at the political space that we find ourselves, and also looking at the actions and inactions of political leadership in this country. And I will conclude from that perspective. So I'll look at globalization as a contextual definition. I'm looking at it as the process of interaction or integration among people, companies, and governments. I'm also looking at it from the perspective of cultures, where that happens in one particular location.
Okay, Major,
other people.
Major, sorry for cutting you. I think we have a few challenges here. We are unable to see your screen, so I have shared mine. Or possibly if I can stop my screen sharing, then when you share your screen, if you can share your PowerPoint itself instead of just the desktop. Or I should go on with mine.
Go on with yourself.
Okay, so then maybe if you want me to move to the next slide, you indicate next slide.
Let's move on, sir.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Let's go to the next slide. Yes, sir. So let's move on, sir. Let's go to the contextual definitions. So move on. Move on. Let's move on. Okay. So we are looking at globalization, as I mentioned, and let's look at crisis. Please, let's hold on there. Let's hold on at crisis. Prof. Fletcher has talked about crisis, so I don't want to belabor the point here. Please, you can go back a little. I want to look at political leadership as the structured political support that we have in every country, that's made up of the ministers and the people who have been elected into power to control the resources and distribute the resources and also control the affairs of the state. So contextually, that's how we're going to look at political leadership. Yes. Then we're looking at issues facing the globe at the moment. So, Prof, let's move on. One slide ahead. Good. So, financial issues are critical. So, global financial collapse was key. Wars and conflicts are very critical. Currently, we are looking at the war in Russia and Ukraine, which is also affecting everybody, even though it's very far from Ghana. Everybody's being impacted. So, these are the things that we are looking at the moment. And some of the challenges as well as emerging diseases, especially the disease of COVID. Again, we are looking at multidimensional poverty and hunger. We are looking at issues related to climate change, drought, hurricanes, flooding, and issues like that. And slow growth and high and persistent inflation that we are witnessing across, but especially in our country, Ghana. Additionally, we're also looking at transnational organized crime. We're looking at issues relating to population growth and indeed the youth belt that we have in our country at the moment. We are also looking at emergence of far-right movements and political radicalization. So you can see that these days, especially in the developed countries, America in particular, people are challenging even election results. So it's important that we look at it as aspect. We're looking at the issues of the erosion of traditional sovereign borders, as I mentioned, occasioned by ICT. We are looking at acculturation issues and issues related to gender, including LGBTQ+ issues that are coming up. And we're also looking at issues of waning trust in democracy, especially after elections. And as I indicated, the re-emergence of coup d'etats in developing countries, Mali, Burkina Faso and all, and also the breakdown in the supply chain, which is affecting food supply across board in the whole world. So move on, please. So these are critical issues that we need to put in perspective. So you could see that across the globe, almost every country is being affected on one way or the other because something has happened elsewhere, which may not necessarily be close. And it takes political leadership to look at these things and put them in perspective and drive them for the benefit of the people who they are supposed to look after. And IMF is stating that about 39 out of 69 countries from low-income economies have the risk of being in debt distress. This tells us that anything that happens elsewhere have relative impact on the countries that are not even relatively close and they have impact in our country, Ghana. Let's move on, sir. Next slide. So what are we talking about here? In Ghana, the whole political landscape also is dictated by the 1992 Constitution. And we want to select leadership here. The Constitution itself has created a problem in itself for us. Number one, for example, somebody to arise or to aspire to hold the high office of a presidency just need to be a Ghanaian by birth, must attain 45 years, and there's no requirement for the person to have any education. Come to parliament, the person needs to just be 25 years, and there's no requirement for the person to have any education or quote unquote, any high level training. And these are the people we are going to put the destiny of the country into their hands for them to work on. Again, the president comes and also selects almost all the executives going to work with, including municipal, districts, and metropolitan chief executives. So the Constitution itself presents a challenge which makes it difficult for our leaders to, quote unquote, to be ready to hold some of the offices we bestowed on them. Next slide, sir. So the Constitution creates a problem for us as a Ghanaians. The next one we need to understand is that if they come to power, what are we expecting them to do? And here I want to recommend the zeitgeist political leadership style, which all of us must begin to look at contextually. Now, what it means is that the zeitgeist leadership skill is concerned with four main things. The person must have analytical capability, effective communication capability, social and emotional capability, and should be enthusing or inspiring leader. So these are critical contexts that in crisis leadership, we need to have people who may possess these kind of capabilities or skills. Next slide, sir. Next slide. Thank you. So the person also must also have what we call the contextual, please back, contextual or situational capabilities as a leader. Here we're looking at somebody who can apply his ability or knowledge in the real world. So contextual intelligence here describes how skilled individuals are using what they know in making work from one situation to another, and not just copying and pasting whatever they are supposed to do. So here, they must have an idea of what has happened prior, but have hindsight experience. They must have the perspective of what is happening at the moment, and the leader must also have foresight. So in crisis leadership, these things must also prevail in the leaders we select. The next slide, sir. So it's important we put this also in perspective when we're dealing with crisis leadership. So how are we going to look at the roles that they can play in helping us? So I want to make the following submissions to our current crisis leadership that we find in our country. Yes, sir. Next slide. So the first thing is that the individual, our leaders must have what we refer to as future mentality. Whatever they do today must have some future aspect in them. What do they want to leave as legacies when they leave office? Again, our leaders must have the ability to influence for a positive results. They must also have in perspective what we call social responsibility. What are they going to do now? What will impact on the environment, will impact on the people, or will impact on posterity? They must look at that. Additionally, they must have cultural sensitivity. Now people are moving across borders, number of people are coming in. It's not only one cultural group that are supposed to be located in the country called Ghana. So they must be responsible and be sensitive in the cultural aspects of their people. Again, there must be multicultural leadership style that they must build. Yes, if you are from Ashanti region, for example, you cannot say everybody must behave as such. If you are from the Volta region, you cannot say everybody must behave as such. If you are from the Northern region, you cannot say people must behave as such. So you must be multicultural in your leadership drive. Again, you must have what we call ability to what we call context analysis. Each issue must be dealt with case by case and must be married against the prior, the present, and the future. Again, our leaders are supposed to be agents of change. Not change in a negative direction, but change aimed at improving the life of the people. Again, leaders are supposed to have influence, but their influence must be constructive. Influence that doesn't necessarily work on the rise of people. Influence that is supposed to have positive impact on people's lives. Again, they should be able to have the ability to analyze knowledge presented to them. Profs are talking about them relying on science to take decisions. Very, very important. When data is presented, for example, to a minister, how does the minister analyze that knowledge given him at any space of time? Our leaders must also be critical thinkers. They must take their time, evaluate all options, and choose the best after the possible options presented. Again, they should be consensus builders. Are they ruling or are they being leaders and dividing the country or dividing the people? No, our leaders must have that in mind. And they must have their mission awareness in perspective. When coming to power, what did you tell the people? You told them you're going to improve their living condition. That mission must be at the forefront and be the focus of the leader. And one other thing that the leaders must have is possession, what we call possession of grit. Here we are looking at leaders who have the ability to combine their awareness, combine their intelligence, combine their exposure, and combine every other experience they have gained to ensuring that they do and deliver best for the people. Another one is that they must have what we call willpower. Here I'm looking at willpower as the ability to resist short-term temptations to meet long-term goals. Our leaders are ready to do that. In most of the things that we've seen across, some of these our leaders do not have the willpower at all. They are only interested in instant self-gratification at the expense of the future or delayed gratification. The last point I want to dwell on about the things I want to submit about the zeitgeist leadership is political will. I conducted a research about small-scale illegal mining into gold sector in Ghana. And one of the critical issues that came out was a lack of political will by the political elite, who themselves sometimes pronounce that they are going to deal with that particular issue. So leaders must have political will. And when we talk about political will, the next slide says, talk about political will, we are talking about certain indices that must come to play. Here we are looking at how does the government also use the initiative, technology, mobilization, public commitment, application of creative awareness, mobilizing stakeholders, and also community or continuity of effort, and lastly, learning and adoption or adaptation to issues that you meet. In this our world, most often than not, we only look at issues identified, but we are not able to look at issues that we can correct. So it's important that we take all these things into perspective and deal with them as a group of people who want to improve the life of our people. So we must learn and adapt. Next slide. We must also ensure that everything that we do sits with what we have told the people that we can do. Next slide. So in all this, supposed to be people lording their power over others. Crisis leadership differs from normal routine leadership, and Prof. Fletcher have said so, and I side with him 100%. The stakes are too high. People are expecting more. They want you to do more for them because the situation is volatile and institutional constraints may persist. Emotional intelligence, which we require in this era, requires that we nurture and develop ourselves by recognizing, identifying some key elements that pertain to our leadership. Again, monitoring our reactions and behaviors, and also developing our skills as leaders as we ensuring that our people get what will make them better in the futures. The next one, the next slide. As we move on and you are about concluding, I want to state that as a country, we need effective leadership with the resolve and capacity to mobilize us. Our leaders should not be only representing and mirroring us as followers, but they must create, advance, and embed this identity in the pursuit of the goals they've set for ourselves. Our political leaders should see leadership as knowing how to work with and encouraging us as a whole to participate in that particular mission they set on themselves. It must also have the skills to work with individual people and aspire as best as they can. What I want to state is that the 1992 Constitution has set up its own parameter for which leaders are selected. And they must also ensure that in as much as they don't have maybe the requisite qualification skills at the time of coming into power, they must attempt to develop themselves. And they are to create a shared vision for the future and build up viable strategic plans for the present. They are to negotiate ways to achieve what is needed, whilst also listen to what is wanted. It's not what they want to deliver. I want to believe that in this perspective, leaders need to ensure that they think, quote unquote, beyond the box. They ensure they bring everybody's attention to bear on what is needed and ensuring that at the end of the day, the development of the people and that the country Ghana should be the first to consider, not the development of self. On that note, I want to thank you very much as we open the floor for us to share ideas as a team. Thank you very much for the opportunity, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Major Dr. Ebenezer Kwakye, for such a powerful presentation. You've always been wonderful when it comes to issues on leadership. And as we are preparing the way for questions, and after the questions, there's going to be a thorough discussion on what we expect leadership to do And that's what we are going to put in a form of a communique. But before that, I would want to find out from any of our academic reviewers, Dr. Francis Sarkodie, Mr. Jacob Lanchru, and Kwame Kluche, if you have any general review or general observation before we go into the general question and answers, as well as going into the discussion that will be led at the same time by Major Agyemang Kwakye. Okay, Dr. Francis Sarkodie.
Okay, I think I'm okay. I don't have anything to raise at the moment.
Okay, so Mr. Jacob Lanchru.
Well, so I think I have a simple comment to make. Whilst we are thinking of putting together a pathway to share with leadership in this period of crisis, I think that we may at some point in time need to itemize the thematic issues that are prominent for us in this particular time. So those thematic issues, gleaning from what colleague just shared, he's talked about so many recommendations for leadership. So I'm suggesting that based on those thematic areas, as a matter of concern for us, we would just assign a particular expected leadership approach to these particular issues in terms of resolving them. Because we run a democratic, dispensation. And for that matter, in democracy, you are saying that you are open to various views and concerns or opinions. But the question is that what we see as a trend? Yes, you have the Council of State, you have other relevant stakeholders who make input to government decisions. But what we are seeing, we have an assumption. We can say that, okay, we are proposing that, assuming that the assumption that we are thinking that, look, possibly maybe government is not having a listening ear to what other stakeholders are saying. This is what we are proposing as a possible approach to addressing some of the situations. Because, for instance, if you pick like Galamsey, for instance, I'm sure if you want to open up for inner cost contribution, maybe the government may not find a solution or may not be able to take a very strong, bold decision to address Galamsey, because like people have alleged that you still have people in your own circles who are, promoting this kind of Galamsey activity. And so some of the thematic trending issues, we need to propose a particular leadership approach. When it comes to leadership is just like a tool. For instance, if you say you go to a building site, you have building materials. These tools are different. You have the pickers, you have the shovel and others. So leadership in itself is a tool in getting something done. Now, which of the government or for governance purposes that we should adopt in line with some of the thematic issues that are really itemized and are bothering us. You talk about Galamsey, macroeconomic issues, macroeconomic issues. You talk about, under the you can find inflation. Inflation may have its macro or micro perspective and all that. So what's the leadership? Which leadership approach should the government, adopt? Because in times of crisis, sometimes you don't have to wait to be listening to everybody. Sometimes you end up being lobbied or being influenced. Okay, so that we see what are the corresponding approaches that we are recommended that we observe. So what we observe based on public concerns and what we propose, what should be the leadership approach or leadership style in addressing this. So that's my concern. Okay,
thank you, Mr. Jacob Planchu. He's also a fellow of the Institute. So basically, you'd want us to look at the thematic areas. But before we come to Dr. Abbey, let me give Kwakye Kluche, Mr. Kwakye Kluche.
Yes, Doc. Thank you so much. So I have some few takeaways from Professor Fletcher's presentation.
Okay.
The key things I took notice of was the fact that, first and foremost, a good leader must believe in scientific data, because the scientific data actually presents information about what has happened over the period, as in the past to present, and also upon analysis of such data, we'll be able to help predict the future for purposes of policy and implementation. And so a technocratic reasoning is an expert perspective on an issue. So clearly from Professor Fletcher's presentation, it is important for leaders to veer more towards a technocratic approach to solving issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Kwame. Then let me bring in Dr. Victor Abbey. He's also a fellow of the Institute. Dr. Victor Abbey.
All right, thank you, Dr. Adams, and good morning to all present here. The presentations have been very insightful, especially starting with Professor Fletcher to Major Dr. Agyemang. And for me, all the issues are very critical to the sustainability of our governance system here in Ghana. One of the things I have always argued has been, and I mean, it reflected in the presentations, has been the fundamentals. That's the constitution governing leadership, the political leadership of our country. And if the fundamentals, the arrangements within that constitutional instrument or document or other aspects within our space here in Ghana is a constitutional review. One of the key points I think we should capture as well should involve or should include the implementation of the constitutional review submissions, those areas where, so that the powers, of the presidency, the powers, the decentralization issues, and the empowerment of other state institutions. Like Obama said when he came to Ghana, what the world needs in this current environment or space is not strong leaders, it's strong institutions. So if we are able to strengthen the institutions of state, institutions of governance, and empower them to the extent of, pushing the agenda for the survival of the citizenry, for me, no matter the crisis, such institutions and system will be able to, cater for it. So one of the points will be we start from the constitutional implementation of those constitutional review submissions. And then secondly, the other part of it is developing, the need to empower an institution like the Ghana, I think we call them, is a National Development Commission or Authority. I'm not too sure the name as of now. And then collectively, we engage all stakeholders. In this crisis, in part of crisis management, you need to engage, Professor Fletcher mentioned, the technocrats. So in this case, in our overall governance arrangement, somebody mentioned the Council of State is there, of course, but as to whether they are playing the right role or they are empowered to even influence governance is another issue altogether. So you involve the stakeholders, the traditional rulers, the academics, or if you like, the technocrats. You bring the religious aspect, the young people, and all the economists, every stakeholder, to a point where we determine, a vision. For it is said that if you know where you are going and there is a challenge along the way, you get to fashion out how you adapt yourself to the situation and still remain on focus. But as it is, we don't have, a country vision. We really don't have that. So every leader, that is one of the reasons why, as Professor Fletcher said, you have ideological, focus, where people, the leaders we have do not seem to, factor in or consider technical expertise as solutions to problems. So just not to go more, I think these are some of the areas that we need to look at. The governance arrangement system, that's from the constitutional point of view. Some work has been done. Why are we not implementing that? What can be done? There are good suggestions in there. Why are we not involving? So we get the stakeholders across board and have carved out a vision that will guide the country. And I think that in the midst of deglobalization, which all of us, I believe we all are picking up from the global stage now, where the Western world is beginning, as part of their survival, arrangement, trying to embark on some kind of protectionism to ensure that they have resources available for their development. In the midst of all this, we need to have a vision, which factors all these things into it. So that's what I will say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Victor Abbey. So quick one from Dr. Victor Abbey. Basically, we should look at the implementation of the Constitutional Review Committee's report. It should be implemented. And we also should look into a national development plan for the country. And in this sense, we should try as much as possible to engage all stakeholders. The engagement should be all stakeholders. So these are the two recommendations from Dr. Victor Abbey. So at this point in time, we still open the floor for contribution, for questions. Our facilitators are ready, from Professor Fletcher to Major Dr. Ebenezer Agyemang Kwakye. If you have any other questions, please, the floor is open for your questions. Contributions as well. Okay, Daniel, Kwame, Kwame, raising your hands are up again. Okay, see your question.
Yes, thank you so much, Honorable Country Director. Please, my question or comment is in relation to the presentation by Major Dr. Agyemang. Respectfully, with regards to the constitutional provision, Article 62 of the 1992 Constitution, that's Chapter 8. The key point he made there, which he feels is a point of contention, or in other words, there's an omission or something very critical for us to look at. It has to do with the educational requirements of whoever is qualified to be a president or a parliamentarian of Ghana. Respectfully, I would like to avert our minds to Article 1 of the 1992 Constitution, which basically reads, that's 1:1. It says that the sovereignty of Ghana resides in the people of Ghana, in whose name and for whose welfare the powers of government are to be exercised in the manner and within the limits laid down in this Constitution. So in my mind, I want to believe that using a purposive approach to interpreting this particular provision, Article 62, the framers of the Constitution would have in mind that, one, they want to give opportunity to all persons, herein Ghanaians, to be able to aspire to any level that they so wish within Ghana, which is constitutional. And so I feel the provision in Article 1:1, appears to be a form of control or to check the issue which may arise in Article 62, which has to do with the requirement of education, educational background or level of education of whoever is aspiring to be a president or parliamentarian, in the sense that before a parliamentarian or a president gets to the stage of actually contesting for a president, that person might have gone through several structures of the political party, then to the national level, where the entirety of Ghanaians will decide who is competent thereof to be the president of Ghana. And so I feel well-meaning Ghanaians who are seeded with all this knowledge that we are talking about now, leadership skills, which are relevant for good leadership, I think those people will be able to make such informed decisions. And so I would like to use this opportunity to congratulate the Chartered Institute of Leadership Ghana for such a very important role they are playing in actually bringing to bear and also teaching people all the relevant leadership skills that they should look out for. And so this is one way for us to be able to achieve this. Respectfully, this is my view.
Okay, so Dr. Kwakye, do you have any response? But before Dr. Kwakye comes in, if you have any question, can you use the reaction at the bottom of your Zoom to raise your hand up, and I'll call you in to make your submission. Dr. Kwakye.
Yeah, thank you very much. I share in the submissions made by the contributor that indeed Article 1.1 states that the president becomes the embodiment of the state and that he shares the powers that supposed to come with that particular office. However, recent events tend to indicate that in as much as the person necessarily may not have education, is beginning to impact on certain decisions, understanding, and even relationships that they build. And from that perspective that I was trying to draw our attention to, that we need to begin to interrogate that particularly generalized acceptance that any Ghanaian with sound mind, quote unquote, can be a president. Seriously, in every institution, starting from wherever we find ourselves, there's some kind of requirement. For me, political office is some kind of application for a job kind of thing. So the person comes in that I can deliver. However, he must also have certain basic and exposures that can help him deliver better when he comes to office or when he's exposed to all the myriad of data, information, and some kind of, as I said, the crisis that he may face. From that perspective, I'm trying to worry that can't we go back and review and maybe bring in some kind of a caveat, which will not give any blanket offer to anybody, quote unquote, to become a president or a parliament because, quote unquote, is a Ghanaian. And from that perspective, I'm trying to let us begin to think about it, but not necessarily to more or less dissociate myself from Article 1, which is really alluded to. So that's the key issues I wanted to raise. Yes, sir. Okay,
thank you, Dr. Kwakye. But before I bring in Mr. Jacob Plantrul, you earlier made some, you made a contribution, I think from Mr. Jacob. You said that we should really look at the thematic areas in areas of like the continuous depreciation of the Ghana cedi as a thematic area, the rising cost of food as another thematic area, the rising cost in fuel prices, another thematic area. So there are different thematic areas that we can look at. So if you have any submission within any of this thematic area, like what's your recommendation on how the government will be able to tackle the continuous depreciation of the Ghana cedi? You can still raise up your hand. How the government can handle issues on the rising cost of food, fuel, and other things that are ongoing. You can still raise up your hand so that when you call you in, you bring in those submissions. The reviewers are there. Once you make those contributions, they will write all those ones down. We'll put a very fine document in an official communication. Then we'll do the submission. Mr. Jacob Plantrul, can you please give us your submission?
All right. So, I just want to go in a very much more of a natural way on the submission. We have been criticized in terms of people with academic people with technical, we hold conferences and recommendations, and the recommendations are more, but we are not able to define our recommendations with respect to the context of the situation. And so it becomes very difficult for the recipient or the audience to really get into our world, to adopt whatever we propose, to apply for practical, what you call benefits, okay? So it was on that thinking, because I had the submission from the others, where we're thinking about how are we going to, from the constitutional point of view, okay, where would give other stakeholders the opportunity for them to also input like traditional leaders' opinion. That comes under a transformational leadership style, because if you are transformational, you get all your followers to give their bit of contribution or perspective to a particular goal. You set the goal, how do they contribute to achieving that goal? Okay, so what I'm saying is that under that, what are the specifics in terms of decision making, in terms of policy perspective, and in terms of implementation? So even from the policy point of view, there is a leadership approach to it. And even when it comes to the implementation of it, there is a leadership approach to it. Okay, we are seeing that leadership in times of crisis. So what should be the approach in times of crisis? Should the president say that, look, in these times of crisis with fuel prices hiking, I am going to take a bold decision, okay, and say that I am vetoing, or I'm deciding that we are going to bring back the Tema Oil Refinery. For the Tema Oil Refinery to be on its own, I'm going to push cabinet to approve X amount of money. Let us do a pilot financing, either from whichever fund, whether the consolidated fund or whatever fund, to support the operation of Tema Oil Refinery for a pilot period, whether it's public, private partnership, to get that refinery running. Because I know the likes of Vitor, the likes of ENI, how can they come into the picture? Okay, so that should be a leadership approach. That, look, I'm saying that as a leader approach to get this done, is whether we should regulate prices or not. Then that one, you can look at the transformational aspect, where you want to include other stakeholders, like what happened recently by bringing together all the representatives of the market women and all that to give their views. But when these views are given, what should be the specific leadership approach towards getting these things, manifested for our benefits? Otherwise, sometimes all these submissions become theoretical, and we are not able to get the benefits of these. Coming to bear on our. So that's why I still come back to the point that we need to be very specific on the thematic areas that are we also see. What do we think that we can to list the thematic areas? The science from the media and from individuals. How do we put them together, and how do we compare what is the current situation and what should have been the ideal situation if we want to invoke or apply leadership parameters? So that is what I.
Okay. Okay, so thank you, Mr. Planchul. Yes, let's bring in. Okay, thank you, Mr. Planchul. Let's bring in Mr. S.K. Evans. Mr. S.K. Evans, for you to make your submission. After that, after Mr. S.K. Evans, we go to Mr. Armstrong, Ephraim Awimbugri. So, Mr. S.K. Evans.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman, and the members of the House. What I want to add to the conversation or the discourse is that when we talk of leadership,
Hello, Mr. Evans. Okay, so we are unable to hear from Mr. Evans. So Armstrong, Ephraim. Armstrong, Ephraim. Okay, so before Armstrong comes in, let's go back to is Prof. Fletcher still with us? Okay. Okay, so let's go back to Dr. Kwakye. Dr. Kwakye, from the discussion so far, the question is then, yes, we can have the policies, we can have the frameworks, we can have all the solutions and the rest. What should be the leadership approach in ensuring that, yes, the solution that are presented is being followed? For instance, as Mr. Jacob Lanchu brought in, if you want to bring back the Tama oil refinery, you want to inject in some cash and some money for them, even if it's a pilot project, for them to begin running and see if there could be a way we can get the crude here and do our own some small refinery here and still go about it and the rest. What should be the leadership approach? How do we communicate this, the leadership way to ensure that, it's effective? But by the way, in Ghana, we still have two other refineries in area of diesel. I'm told of the Akwaba refinery and some other refinery that are doing some small, refinery for diesel. It's just about the petrol that we don't have the refinery. But you see, from Mr. Jacob Lanchu, what should be the leadership approach in communicating this?
Okay. Thank you very much. I want to step on Dr. Prof. Fletcher's submission that we should have the opportunity to interrogate and be supporting our decisions by data. So in as much as we are still in crisis, we should not be seen to be taking a decision which should not inure to the benefit of the people in future. So if there's any research, data, analysis, assessment done already about TOR, but maybe we're constrained by certain competing factors, maybe finance and other issues that can be brought in. Secondly, what kind of maybe diesel or crude are we going to use at TOR? Are we going to bring it from outside? Do we have control over that? We're going to use our own crude. These are the things that we can consider. So getting to that trail is relevant, but at least we need to ensure that the decisions that we take are supported by data and that we have taken our time to look at it from a very multi-dimensional perspective. Very important, I share with him. However, I want to state that one key thing that also is running down the behavior of our political elite is political will and the fear of losing elections. Let's go back to Galamsey, for example. Galamsey was largely successful until we're getting to the last election. 3 months to the election, every effort put in by the government was thrown away because MPs and people in power thought that the continuous implementation of that particular drive were going to let them loose. So that's where I come back to political will. And here, I have done a research work which I can share with you in future, which suggests that there are certain things that the government can do without necessarily targeting the people and will still be successful in this fight against illegal mining. I'm speaking from a practical exposure as a military officer and my exposure in the mining industry, and also having done the research at the doctoral level in respect of that. So here we're looking at the value chain of illegal mining. What are the components that we can take away and delink the whole process? Some of them you can do without even causing disaffection among people. Let me list some of them, maybe for the purpose of this discussion. Excavators. One group of people, and Dr. Abis was right, that we need to bring stakeholders to the table. Go and arrest an illegal miner. You have done nothing, so to speak, because these illegal miners are sponsored. Who owns the excavator and who even, for example, sponsored them, and who even, for example, supplies them with diesel? We have never had any discussion where fuel post or fuel station owners have been brought in our discussion against illegal mining before. We don't, as a country, we don't do that. But these are the people who are giving people diesel on credit and even giving them diesel on whatever it is for them to go and work with. So we have to look at the practical side of it, as he said, and look at what we can do. For me, in a fight against Galamsey, for example, if there's political will, who will succeed? And what are the things that we are going to look at? There's economic side to it. There's a machine called a Shanfan, which they are using across, but that's what they are using to build all the boats and platforms on the river bodies. These Shanfans come from China, and they pass through Tema ports. The people who go to clear pay taxes, and they bring them to areas for our people to go and buy or lease. If we buy Shanfan, what will be the economic impact on Ghana? What can we say is the taxation point where we allow the Shanfans to come to give us that long-term negative impact on our environment, on our water bodies, and even our own health? So it's important we isolate them, but we can drive them by data. But at the end of the day, what decision we take during crisis should not a decision that in itself will create crisis in future. We must be very circumspect, must be very methodic, and be very thorough. We must support our decisions by data and research, and we can do things without necessarily causing any disaffection amongst the people, and also in the democratic space, lose the electorate and therefore lose our political power. So political will is critical in the decisions and actions that we want to drive for our leadership. That's what we'll say for now.
Okay, so Doc, after you've made mention of political will, but before Prof left in the chat, Prof wrote something. He said that a very important question is, it is important that the technocrat presents the advice in a way that will be understood by non-technical people, just as a trained teacher will present concept to a young learner. So in how should leaders be able to communicate the challenges that we are having now to the non-technocrat people without making it so technical in such a way that people don't even understand? I don't know if you get it. We want to look at how then do we make such communication. Dr. Abe even made mention of, no, I think that's Mr. Jacob Landru. For instance, if you want to go to a price regulatory system, want to regulate prices, even in the market now, how then do we communicate it in a way that the non-technocrat will be able to understand?
Yeah, thank you, sir. I think that one of the key characteristics of effective leadership is effective communication. Leaders understand that they are going to communicate an idea. When it comes to maybe the business environment, we call it maybe change management. In that case, you are bringing a new idea, which the people are not used to. It's not part of their daily routine. So you want them to be you want them to understand. Then you can now tune them to go with the idea you are bringing in. We should get it clear that in the chain of communication, you are saying somebody is sending the message. The sender must go to a certain receiver. And within that space, between the sender and the receiver, there are nuances that we need to look at. These nuances are some of the technical issues that you need to break it down. So for example, if an idea, for example, we're going to change the price of something, you must package it in a way that the people will understand that, yes, when the price is changed, these are the benefits. Even if I'm going to maybe face hardship, these are the benefits that I will near to in the future. So we need to take our time and prime the communication and the style and the language we are going to put. Secondly, we must stratify the communication. Let me give an example. This government, for example, talk about free education. So if you go and do an advert at GTV and talk about some of the progresses or some of the things that the government has done as free education, GTV goes beyond maybe Ashanti region, Brown Harford region, and goes to maybe the north. If it goes to the north where they are already enjoying free education, what have you done so far with that particular communication? It's not going to be effective because the people don't see any relevance to what you are bringing on board, which they are already enjoying. So it's important that you stratify. It's important that you aggregate. It's important that you know the target group. It's important that you also count the language to suit the level of education, the exposure, environment, the culture, and even the gender of the group you want to speak to. So communication itself must be effective, but it must also be sent in a way that the people you intend to receive will understand and participate in every action you want to follow from the particular communication you carry across. So it's important that we speak, but it's also important that we look at the content of what we are sending through. It's important that we seek to communicate very well to the people who are supposed to be a target group. Yes. Sir.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Ephraim Arimugri, kindly give us a submission. After that, we go to Kwame. Mr. Ephraim, kindly give us a submission.
Okay, thank you very much, Doc, for the opportunity, and kudos to our speakers for meddling our topic. I just want to make some few inputs regarding leaders making use of technocrats. It is also important that these technocrats remain, unbiased as much as possible in advising these leaders in times of crisis. When we allow political affiliation to cloud our technocratic experience and skills, then we tend to advise to skew in favor of what our leaders want to hear. And this might not help favorably during crisis, as well spoken. Now, on the thematic area of the city, I have always remained that you realize that leaders in Africa succeed by chance. Why do I say that? Leaders in Africa succeed by chance because when the global environment or the global market is stabilized, then you are lucky to have a stable economy and you can brag about it as a political achievement. But when the global economy is destabilized, they realize that we feel the impact, i.e. Russia, Ukraine war, and the host of other crises. The reason is that we import largely than we export. Let's not even talk about the dollar. Let's talk about common safer. Okay, the common safer here. You go to Agyemang, and the safer is even bastardizing the CD. Why? Because virtually Ghanaian traders even go to Agyemang, have to exchange CD for safer, and the safer is seriously also bastardized in our city. So for me, I think the common solution available for us to be able to address this amicably is for us to take our industrialization hub seriously. When I heard of one district, one factory, I was so much enthused and glad. But what has been the output in quantifiable terms about one district, one factory? What has been the contribution of one district, one factory, the economy of Ghana? We are still making it a political talk, and that is what we need to shift away from. Okay. So we need to take exports serious.
Okay. Okay, so thank you, Doctor. Thank you.
So that we export more and crisis.
Okay, so Mr. Ephraim, thank you for your submission, and we are also sorry about the background noise. So we'll move on to Dr. Abi. Dr. Abi.
All right, thank you, Doc. Once again, I just want to add a little voice to Major Dr. Agyemang's points on communication. Yes, he succinctly covered the points, but I want to bring the other perspective, what I describe as the posturing of the leaders or the leader, in this case, the ultimate, the presidency, or the various categories of political leadership, also communicates a lot to, promoting support within the system or even within the populace. Because it's one thing communicating or even stratifying or the different levels of communication going out there, but the posturing of the ultimate leader himself also communicates something to the followers as to whether those technical submissions will be implemented or not. Can very much be affected by the posturing of the leader. That's one other aspect I want to bring to the fore. Now, let me quickly also state that, you see, in crisis management, as Professor Fletcher said, you need to first of all accept that you are in crisis. Once we where you want to go plays a critical role, because you can have all the research data information available to you, but without a well carved out roadmap where exactly you want to go to, what is your plan collectively agreed by all, you may just be dancing around your data without coming out with anything meaningful. So that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Abi. So we'll take the last. Okay, we'll take the last two. After which we'll give our chairperson the chance to give us her closing remarks, because we promised we would have to close on time. So we'll take the last two. After which we give the chairperson the opportunity to give us her closing remarks. Kwame, kindly give us a submission.
Okay, thanks so much, Doc. Respectfully, as we are discussing crisis we are in as a country, one of the prominent ones we know of is with regards to galamsey, which is the illegal or unregulated mining, and the fact that it has actually caused a lot of damage to our source of water and even to our agricultural life. There were several schools of thought. One was as to whether small-scale mining should be put on hold for the meantime. Respectfully, with regards to this, I wanted to avert our minds as we are drafting a form of communique or a policy or a guide to the presidency to help in this direction. Please, if you make reference to Section 4 of the Minerals and Mining Act, that's Act 206, that's Act 703, you'll see that the minister has a delegated power, an executive power granted to him by virtue of the president, who is a trustee to all the minerals found in Ghana, according to Section 1 of the Mining Act. And so the minister has a discretionary power as to whether to grant a mining lease or not under Section 4 of that act. Now, if you look at the small-scale mining, also known as the restricted mining lease, is actually regulated by Section 81 to Section 94 of Act 703, which is the Minerals and Mining Act 2006. Now, in view of all the various provisions in this particular statute, clearly it begs the question as to whether the minister or the executive authority is indeed following through all the various requirements which is precedent or subsequent to the grant of a mining or mineral lease. The first one has to do with whoever wants to get a mining lease granted. That person must first and foremost, after going through all the various process of the recognizance license and so on, the person must be able to show or provide a developmental strategic plan of the mining community or where the mining will take place, as to how that company or individual plan to actually develop or contribute to the development of that particular community. Now, secondly, in the Minerals and Mining Act, part of the requirement also is a strategic plan requirement by the whoever is seeking to have a mining lease granted to him, to provide details of how he or she intends to restore the land after mining. And 3, with regards to employment of citizens of Ghana, so that there can be that kind of inclusion in the mining process. So the disconnect, in my view, is that it appears the regulatory authority, which is the Minerals Commission, and the executive authority, who is the grantor of such mineral rights, the minister hearing, they are failing such mining communities, in the sense that, assuming it was the case that they are following through and ensuring that such companies are really implementing the development strategic plans of such communities, I'm not sure we'll be having the menace we have now with the unregulated illegal mining, which is galamsey, and the threat it is posing to our livelihood or our living. So, in my view, I think that because those living in such mining communities are not part of the process, they are not gaining, they are not benefiting, they are still living in abject poverty, while such companies are making so much and also degrading or destroying the environment in a way, it has created this kind of a push to that angle of illegal mining.
Okay.
So, in my view, we have to compel the executive authority and also communicate to the Minerals Commission so that they can perform their role with regards to these specific requirements. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. So we'll take the last one from Mr. Jacob Planchu, and after which Major Agyemang will give us his closing remarks. Then we'll take the final remarks also from our chairperson. Then we'll close the session for today. So, Mr. Jacob Planchu, kindly let's hear from you.
All right. So I think it goes back to what I was talking about earlier in my submission. I think Kwame has made a very clear input, because all that we are talking about, we need to understand what is the posturing, because I think the earlier speaker before Kwame talked about the leadership posturing and also dwelled on the political will. I think as an institute, whatever that we want to put out there, we need to be clear. We need to distinguish what the what is, and we need to also prescribe our hypothesis. So for instance, Kwame just talked about the fact that there appears to be some kind of disconnect, okay, between the grantor and also the people who are supposed to act, right? And so that disconnect needs to be clearly indicated for, whoever the audience is, to know that, yes, this is a disconnect we have observed or we have learned. And for that matter, our hypothesis is that, or our claim, or what we propose is that if X and Y is done, we may see W or we may see U, right? So like it goes back to what I was talking about, the thematic areas that we need to distinguish and define what is the current case and what is our proposition, so that it becomes very clear. Other than that, it will be like we're just recycling abstractive views, theoretical views, and at the end of the day, we are not able to present what is the case as we are observing per trend, per opinions, or per trending, thoughts, and what we see as a possible prescription to as leaders and the approach to it. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Jacob Planchu. Major, your final remarks.
Thank you very much. I think the contributions are very insightful and very deep. But I want to mention 3 things additional to the contribution made so far. One is that Leadership is about resource control and resource distribution. So if we don't get the right leaders to do that, especially in time of crisis, then we are going to be in trouble. So people who are selected to be political leadership must know that the resources are supposed to be kept in trust for the people. The other one is that there seems to be a gap in the mining side between small-scale mining, community mining, which is coming up now, which is not mentioned in the Act 703, also looking at the big-scale mining, again, and illegal mining. Interestingly, majority of people involved in small-scale mining are unregistered and thus they are illegal. Interestingly, majority of people involved in small-scale mining are politically connected. That's a fact. Interestingly, most community mines, even supposed to be meant for the community, are owned by individuals. So the community themselves, in whose name the prospecting lands may have been procured, do not benefit or don't have control over those sites or those resources. So it's a fact. So we need to establish that as well. The other one we also need to understand is that there seems to be a disconnect between what the regulations and what the law says against the actions of people entrusted to do that. In the mining space, for example, water resources have a role to play, EPA has a role to play, and the Minerals Commission also has a role to play. Who don't have the state at heart. What I want to say is this: crisis comes, most often are not, unexpected. But it takes a prepared mind, it takes the collaboration of all stakeholders, it takes people who can communicate effectively and drive the efforts of the people to help solve the problem. It's going to be a challenge for a while, but I think that with commitment and resolve and some discussion that we initiated like this one, I want to believe that all is not lost as a country and that we can infuse or more or less guide decisions and directions as we pray that the good Lord will give us all the effort and the energy to continue to persevere. I thank you very much for the opportunity and I wish everybody all the best. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Major Dr. Ebenezer Kwakye, Agyemang, retired. Now we'll call on chairperson for today's event, Mrs. Nanadwa Kunedujani, to give us closing remarks.
Hi, fellow members. It's been a great and insightful day, and I'm happy to share this with you. There are things that I take home for me, that as leaders, we should have a technocrat's mind so that we'll be able to take scientific decisions and which are based on evidence in our day-to-day decision making, so as to enable us to maximize effectiveness in our policy interventions when there are crises. And also for us as leaders to adapt and use the desired leadership skills, where we have to be more analytical in the decision making that we do. So on this note, I would like to say that as we are going to put out a communique out there, should look at these thoughts that have been shared and be very tactical in whatever we are going to put out there, so as not the organization being tagged as being political in any aspect of our dealings. So on this note, I would like to thank everyone for our time, for the submissions that we made, and thank the director for CILG, Dr. Ebenezer, for putting this together as leaders for us to share our thoughts. Thank you all very much. I hope that we'll continue to be great leaders in our various fields that we find ourselves, and to support CILG in all endeavors. On this note, I'd also like to call on all of us, those of us who have not been able to pay our subscriptions. These things are what the dwell on function. So please just do that as soon as we can. We all know that the system is hard, yes, but we can pay it in installments so that the CILG can also function very well. Thank you, all of us, and I hope that the next time that we call on us, we make time out of our schedules to be here. It's good we are on time, so next time we know that we are going to be on time. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, CILG, for appointing me to chair today. Thank you. Let's all have a great week.
Okay, so thank you, Madam Chairperson, and thank you everyone for making time to join us for today's event. It's been wonderful having you on board, sharing with us your ideas, your thoughts on how we can, help in building our nation and how to build a better Ghana. At this point in time, can we all put our video on? Can we all put our video on as we've been doing so that we can take our group picture? You put on your video on, you put on your video, you put on your video. Yes, I can see Major is going to the, you put on your video. So we'll take a group picture. We'll take a group picture. And also to let you know that this event will still be uploaded on our YouTube channel. And the YouTube channel would also be shared across other platforms. So you can still go back and watch this event once again. And I will still say thank you very, very, very much, Dr. Major Ebenezer Kwakye retired, for making time. Thank you, Dr. Abe. Thank you, Nanachwa. Thank everyone. The names I'm able to see. Thank you, everyone, for making time. Dr. Abua and Honorable Anthony Agbado, and all those who couldn't make it, but also make the time to send us their apologies. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Professor Fletcher, who also left us for another all-important meeting in the middle of the event. So now we are done with our